So, Mike, congratulations on the seed round. We're thrilled to be leading the 6.4 million that you just closed and announced. But for people maybe who are new to Ridley, what was the original insight that made you believe that the real estate industry needed to be rebuilt around consumers?
Yeah. Well, first off, Dan, thank you so much. It's an honor to be partnered with you guys. I started Ridley out of a personal frustration, a personal experience. I was looking to sell my house in Colorado. I couldn't find a real estate agent who was willing to list it for what I thought was a fair rate. I live in a neighborhood where typically all you need to do is put a yard sign in the front of the house and you'll have an offer by 5 p.m. And I was looking at, over $100,000 in commissions for a process that I didn't think was nearly as complicated as, we've all been led to believe. And so I decided to sell the house myself and learn through that process that it isn't nearly as complicated as we've been led to believe. But also, I found it really concerning that in this sort of AI era, with sort of technology being what it is today, that there wasn't a platform that could guide consumers through the process of buying and selling homes using this technology to make it as simple as possible. And so really decided that I wanted to build the product that I wish existed when I started this journey. With Ridley, we are using AI to guide sellers and buyers now through each stage of the transaction, everything from, the moment they decide that they want to sell, from home preparation and pricing, listing creation and distribution on all the main home buying sites, marketing tools, transaction coordination, everything in this sort of simple, easy to follow workflow. I think, historically, this industry has really been sort of centered around agents. And I think the future will be largely centered around consumers, with platforms being the sort of guiding force in the transaction.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you've repeatedly said that the current system isn't built for consumers. And I think you've even said it costs as much as $100 billion a year in expense to U.S. families, which is pretty staggering.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about your own process that this was sort of born out of. Is there sort of like an anecdote or a sort of an example of something that you can point to firsthand where you just said, hey, this is so fundamentally broken when you were going through this?
Oh man, I experienced quite a few different things. For instance, one issue that I ran into was the industry has or had this rule called the no commingling policy, which basically meant that if you were selling without a real estate agent as a for sale by owner seller, your listing wouldn't appear on the home buying platforms like Zillow and Redfin and the others alongside the agent represented listing. So this effectively meant that if you were operating outside of the system, your listing was suppressed behind a filter in the UI that no one knew existed. The industry has done a very good job of creating rules like this to sort of funnel consumers into the system. I think there's a sort of laundry list of ways in which this happens. That's one example. Getting access to data has been historically sort of gatekept by the MLSs, and it makes it really hard as a consumer to understand how to accurately price your home, what the market conditions are like. Getting distribution on the MLS is obviously challenging. So there's a lot of processes throughout, the transaction that are intentionally sort of made more complicated and more difficult than I would argue are necessary. And we're sort of trying to make that a little easier for the consumer to navigate.
Ridley started this whole thing by rethinking the sell side experience. What were some of the biggest pain points for sellers that you felt like no one in the industry was addressing?
Yeah, it's a great question. Really the two biggest things that we've learned from our sellers who've been using our platform for the last few months are the fears that prevent them from wanting to do this outside of a traditional model working with a real estate agent are one, they don't feel like they can get access to the data they need to accurately price their home. So, you can go look on Zillow and get a Zestimate, which is basically pulling publicly available data, but it doesn't have any context for maybe what in home improvements you've made, any unique features to your home, things like that. So pricing your home accurately is something, this is obviously a transaction that we make very seldomly in our lifetime. It's one of the largest financial transactions of our lives. So getting it right, I think, is really important. And then the other thing was like sort of document guidance. So understanding what things mean as you're going throughout the process. Obviously, there's a lot of forms that you're not familiar with, and you want to make sure you don't get anything wrong. So things like disclosure forms and helping people understand what it means to fill out these disclosure forms properly. When an offer comes in, we can analyze that offer and help you understand what different terms mean. So the document guidance and pricing were some of the things that I think, were most sort of nerve-wracking for consumers as they were coming into this. And then, there's other things like people want to make sure that there's visibility for their homes, right? They want to get distributed everywhere that buyers are searching. So getting, distribution via the MLS was important. And yeah, those were the main things.
Some of your early traction, really impressive. I'm just going to read off some statistics here. 4.6 billion in lead volume, 350 million in private listings, 57 homes sold. And that's all after only launching, 3 to 4 months ago, I think, over the summer?
Yeah, 3 months ago. So we launched in Colorado on July 15th. And we've sold over 60 homes now on the seller side of the platform. And yeah, I think like our timing is really good for a product like this. A lot of folks heard about the NAR settlement a few years ago, where it was supposed to be this big change to how commissions were handled. And while it tactically did change some things, the consumer never really hasn't really felt it. Actually, according to recent data, the commissions have actually increased. So it hasn't resulted in a meaningful change for consumers. So I think, there's frustration amongst the consumer base with how expensive this, process has become. Homeownership is increasingly out of reach for the average consumer. And, I think that combined with this technology that we now have access to that can really play the role of a guide throughout this process has really sort of driven the demand. Of course, we've built a really strong community on social of folks who are equally frustrated, with the industry, and that has continued to grow. And I think, my sense is that we're going to, come spring market, really see a big push here.
Yeah, from a product design standpoint, there's so much here to build to empower sellers. How do you do that without overwhelming them?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I knew coming into this that this product had to be beautiful and simple and easy to follow and easy to navigate. There are a lot of great examples of products that have taken really complex workflows and have boiled them down into a series of tasks and made it really simple for consumers to navigate. And that was largely the inspiration, where you come into the product and you know exactly what you need to do next. If you ever have any questions, you have sort of your co-pilot there to help you navigate things. But we really wanted to take a lot of the friction away for consumers. You have readily available data for you, and we try and make it as simple and as seamless as possible. So I would argue that this is as much a product design and brand challenge as it is a technology one. And so we've invested very heavily in making sure that the workflows are really thoughtful, and we continue to improve upon them, through every transaction.
So I know that one of the uses of the funds that you're raising in this round is to fuel your move into the buy side. What does a truly consumer-first buy side experience look like, and how is that different from what exists today?
The data shows that roughly 90% of homes are found on these home buying sites like Zillow and Redfin and Realtor.com. They're not really found via the MLS. And what a lot of consumers don't realize is that when you interact with these platforms, whether you request a showing or try and ask a question, you're being funneled into working with an agent. You're almost guaranteeing that you're going to have a commission standing between you and the purchase. And so we're really trying to basically make it so that consumers have the ability to navigate the buy side of the transaction, everything from scheduling a showing to seeing a home, having a home inspection, submitting an offer, all of these aspects that are traditionally handled by agents can be seamlessly managed with the platform with expert support, for the moments that matter most. I think that that's an important caveat here that I haven't really mentioned. I don't think that we are trying to remove or eliminate the real estate agents or experts in this process. In fact, I wouldn't say that that's what we're trying to do at all. But we're trying to give consumers the ability, the information, the transparency that they need to navigate the process, and then give them the ability to also call on an expert for the moments that they want additional support. So in Ridley, you can call on a Ridley Preferred Agent, you can call on an attorney for any step of the process that might feel overwhelming to you. But you're only expected to pay for the value you're receiving, right? As opposed to being forced into sort of a one-size-fits-all commission model. So yeah, the buy side, we actually just shipped the first version of our buyer platform on Thursday of last week, and we've got a lot of features to build, and we're already seeing some really great traction.
I know the part of the buy side push too is to just expand the overall funnel that home buyers have access to. I think you're launching access to private listings for sale homes and then soon to be listed. Yep. How does that change the search and discovery process for buyers?
The Ridley Predict Score model that we've developed is really interesting. So we're analyzing a bunch of different data points, things like home ownership length, local market activity, recent mortgage activity. And we're basically, we've created a model that can fairly accurately predict which homes are most likely to come on market next, and give you the ability to connect directly with the homeowner for a private, commission-free, off-market transaction that's platform driven. So I think that's really interesting because it's really sort of forecasting which homes are hitting the market next. You can look up any listing that you might be interested in. You might have a home down the street that is of interest to you, and you can go and check, the likeliness to sell and reach out to the homeowner and indicate interest. And then we also have this very large and growing inventory of private off-market listings. Effectively, these are homeowners who've indicated a willingness to sell for the right price, but they're not actively looking to go through the process of going on the MLS. We now have, I believe, 400 of such listings nationwide, and it's a really compelling offering for sellers. You don't need to sign a listing agreement. You don't need to commit to anything. You can just test the market and see what's happening and see if you get any interest. And then, of course, the Ridley For Sale Homes. These are sellers who are actively using the platform to transact. So my sense is, as our inventory continues to grow, that buyer traffic is going to increase. You don't really need to have 100% of the listings on your platform to get 100% of the eyeballs of buyers, right? So you think about the psychology of a buyer. They're sort of limited by this point in time. When they're looking for a home, they're limited by whatever inventory is available at that point. And so you really want to know every home that's on the market. And so we're already seeing with sort of the early data that we're driving a ton of traffic to the site for these listings. And yeah, I mean, I think, in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to move from a world where agents are the center of the entire transaction to a world where the platform is the center of the transaction, and agents sort of move into these supporting roles and help, buyers and sellers, when they're needed.
I know that AI is actually powering a lot of what makes Ridley different, and you have the benefit of really building with that being native to the company. How do you think about the role of AI and just broadly home buying and selling today?
There are a lot of companies who've attempted to offer low fee services in real estate over the years. And really, the unfortunate reality is that this is an emotional process, right? This is a process that there's a lot coming up for buyers and sellers. You want to be able to sort of communicate with someone, make sure you're thinking about things right. And historically, that relied on a human to, you needed an expert to be able to talk to throughout this process. And I think what's really interesting is, what we're seeing with our sellers now is they're leaning on our chat, on our model, as they would a traditional real estate agent. They're reaching out to them at 2 a.m. They're having chats at 2 a.m. when they have a question or they have a concern. whether it's something to do with pricing or disclosures or whatever it is. And that we've never had that before, right? Like we've never had a model that could scale with consumer need at good economics. And so I think, there's obviously a bunch of different use cases for AI on our platform, be it with pricing, listing creation, transaction coordination, document guidance. But our chat experience has been really powerful so far for our sellers and for our early users. And we expect to, continue to improve upon it. I mean, you can imagine this is going to be like having a really smart real estate agent in your pocket 24/7 to be able to navigate the process with you. And yeah, we're really excited. I think that is sort of key to why our timing is so good right now.
Can you actually expand a little bit on that idea of an AI co-pilot for real estate? I know you mentioned chat as one of those features of the product, but what does that actually maybe look like for a homeowner that's using Ridley today?
Like let's use like maybe pricing as an example. With Ridley, we've created a pricing algorithm. We're pulling from MLS data, from a bunch of different data sources. We're capturing all of your context, things that the public data sources don't show, things like, what home improvements you've made, unique features, whether or not your home has an ADU, whether or not there's any issues, all of that. And we create sort of 3 different pricing strategies for you. But in that, once you've received that, you may still have questions. Like you might want to, understand a little bit more about a recent transaction in your neighborhood, or, you might want to discuss pricing strategy in a little bit more detail because, your home value is not the same as, maybe your pricing strategy. So being able to sort of interact and have sort of a thought partner in the process, I think is really valuable for people. Chat can also do things like, as you're navigating forms, help you understand what every field means. We can pull data from you so that you don't need to go and surface it yourself. So it's really powerful. It could be something as simple as, we also have a chat on the buyer experience where it's trained on the complete knowledge base of your property. So buyers, when they land on a listing, can interact with the listing and learn more about the property without needing to do anything else. It's sort of in line with how buyers want to interact with properties. They don't want to necessarily get on the phone and talk to someone. They might just want to know more about it and maybe schedule a showing without having to be forced into one direction or another. So yeah, there are a ton of different use cases for it, but I see it as a companion throughout the transaction.
So you're actually introducing Ridley Preferred Agents, offering consumers commission-free expert help as part of the process. Why was it something that you actually wanted to do in terms of the integration of agents and honestly reinvention of them rather than just removing them entirely from the process?
Yeah, I mean, again, like the goal was never really to remove real estate agents. It was to sort of help consumers save, billions in unnecessary commissions and sort of unbundle the transaction. But there's definitely a role for experts in this process, right? Sometimes you just want to get on the phone with someone and help, talk to someone about, whatever it is that you're sort of dealing with. So Ridley Preferred Agents are trained on our platform. They're trained on our process. And the model now is basically, if you choose our Pro package, you have on-demand access to a Ridley Preferred Agent. You will only pay for the value that you receive. And really, they're primarily being used for things like, an initial pricing consultation just to make sure, you've got your pricing right, MLS access in some cases, depending on the state. And then usually like the main sort of use case is when an offer comes in and they want to our sellers want to have a conversation with someone to make sure that the offer looks good. So, I think that there will continue to be a valuable role for agents. And it's never really been about removing real estate agents. I think, as the technology continues to get better, I do think that more and more of the transaction will be automated and the agents will move into more and more of a specialized sort of supporting role. But yeah, we think, with our Ridley Preferred Agent program, what's really cool is also solving some of the pain points for real estate agents right now. agents right now face incredibly high lead fees, incredibly high brokerage splits, and they oftentimes will spend many hours on a transaction without anything to show for it. Ridley Preferred Agents get leads for free, and they are paid regardless of whether or not a transaction closes. So they are paid for the value that they provide. And I think this is more in line with how it should be. So yeah, I think it's sort of solving for both sides of the transaction, solving pain points, and so far it's going really well.
So I think we've seen with some of the recent litigation and settlements that consumers are just fed up with fees and are really eager to break free from the commission-based model. What shifts are you seeing in consumer behavior that gives Ridley confidence to go bigger and go faster?
It's harder to quantify because we've built this community now, and we now have tens of thousands of followers in our social communities, and I've had an opportunity to get to know people very well and have a lot of conversations with our customers. And there is a lot of frustration with obviously how expensive homes have become, how expensive the fees have become, and there is a desire to just have more control over this process amongst the consumer base. I believe that. Like I said earlier, I believe that we're going to move with technology being what it is today. I believe we're going to move from a world where the agent's the center of the transaction to one where the platform's the center. And it's kind of inevitable. This is sort of the last, industry, big industry that really hasn't been disintermediated. And I think the timing is now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, as you think about this industry over the next 3 to 5 years, do you think that consumer-led models like Ridley will become the default?
Absolutely. What's most compelling for us in these early days is, when you look at the data that sort of shows you what percentage of the market is traditional for sale by owner, you can see that it's declined over the years. And I would argue that there were a lot of regulations that sort of led to that decline. But what's really exciting for us is the demographic that's actually using Ridley. They're not traditional for sale by owner sellers. I mean, there are some, of course, but these are folks who've maybe sold their home before or have bought a home before. They're roughly familiar with the transaction and the process. And they're mindful of either, wanting to get a home for a better price or wanting to save as much of their equity as possible. And, what's really exciting, Dan, is not only are our sellers saving an average of $43,000 per transaction, but they're outperforming traditional listings on both days on market and list to sold price ratio. So I think it gets increasingly difficult to compete with that over time. And, we're just getting started. We're only in the early innings here. So yeah, I do believe that, in the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot of other folks looking to create sort of a platform driven transaction model like Ridley.
When we talked about Ridley internally, after you and I first met, it sat squarely within a few different theses that we had. I think most notably, this whole idea around the digitization of real estate transactions, in particular on the residential side in these markets that they're obviously massive in terms of the end TAMs. When you think about fifthwall as the right partner from your perspective, what was it that made you want to work with us to lead the round at this moment?
We are heading into an industry in a space that is incredibly complicated, incredibly nuanced. There are different regulations by different states. There are over 500 MLSs. It is very complicated by design. And fifthwall's obviously, has a very focused sort of thesis around proptech. And I think that having someone on the team in these early days with industry experience that can help us navigate a lot of the complexity is really critical. And it was sort of a no-brainer for me, to want to work with you guys for that reason in particular. For Ridley to really reach scale, it's going to require partnerships. It's going to require creating new models for how this transaction is navigated. And with that comes a lot of complexity, and sort of having a partner to help me navigate that and help the team navigate that is really priceless.
How do you maybe think about fifthwall's existing ecosystem, whether it be portfolio companies that we've previously invested in around the digitization of real estate transactions, companies like Opendoor and Hippo and Doma, or our LP network, and how that can accelerate your buy side launch and just generally Ridley as you scale?
So this is a very complicated and long process that we're trying to create a product around. And we need to be very selective with which features we are, which aspects of this transaction and which aspects of this process we are building versus which aspects of this process we are partnering. And we've already started to pull together a great group of partners to come in and fill gaps in the transaction that are going to help make this better. We don't need to reinvent the wheel for every aspect of this. So I think finding the right partners, obviously with title, mortgage, maybe iBuying as well. We want to give consumers options. We want to give consumers the ability to make decisions on their own, and we don't want to force them or funnel them into one particular way. So being able to tap into fifthwall's portfolio network in that capacity is going to be really valuable for us.
So Mike, looking ahead, what does success look like for Ridley 3 to 5 years from now, as you sort of look into your crystal ball and think about what you've created on both sort of the consumer side, but also potentially in different sort of areas as you think about the partnerships that you just discussed? What does that look like in your case?
Yeah, I see Ridley being available in 50 states. Obviously, we are limited right now in we sort of only have our seller experience mostly live in Colorado. We have another 13 states with our sort of essentials plan, but expanding this offering nationwide, giving everyone the ability to have more options and more choices as to how they want to buy and sell homes. I believe that this will be the way people buy and sell homes in the future, that the platform will be structured in such a way that it is incredibly easy to navigate, that agents will have the ability to get compensated for the value that they provide. They'll have a lot of their pain points addressed. I do believe we'll see a significant number in the reduction in the number of real estate agents. There are over, I think, 3 million real estate agents in the United States right now. Only around 25% of them closed a single transaction last year. So there are a lot of real estate agents right now. I think we will see a reduction in the number. But yeah, I would love to build this platform to make homeownership more attainable for more people, to give homeowners the ability to retain more of their equity in this process, and to just make it more transparent, more seamless, and more fair, quite frankly, for consumers. And that's our goal. Like we are very bullish. We are a very mission-driven team. We want to help consumers save tens of billions of dollars in unnecessary fees throughout this transaction. And I do think it's inevitable. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I like where we're sitting. I think we're in a really good position.
So if you had to leave kind of every homeowner today with one piece of advice, what's the one thing you wish every homeowner knew about the process of buying or selling a home? And how is Ridley specifically working to change that?
What I wish that everyone would know is that this transaction is not nearly as complicated as we've all been led to believe. I'll give you a story, Dan. Like when I first listed my house, I was inundated with phone calls from agents telling me that I was going to get sued, that I was going to leave money on the table, that I didn't know what I was doing, that something was going to come up. And these are, fear tactics that the industry has used successfully throughout the years to intimidate folks into working with this traditional model and just accepting the fees that are associated with it. And the reality is, with platforms like Ridley, the process is relatively seamless. Of course, things can come up throughout the transaction, but it is not nearly as complicated as we've all been led to believe. And I believe that within the next 5 years, folks are going to be they're going to wake up to that reality. And yeah, I think the industry, like I said, the industry's done a great job of leading us to believe that this process is way too complicated, and it really is not in reality.
So, Mike, look, we really appreciate your time today. I know I speak for myself and for Fifth Wall. We're thrilled to be partnering with you and Ridley to build the future of the homeownership experience for both buyers and sellers, and could be more thrilled to be a part of the journey. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dan. Grateful to you, and grateful for the opportunity to work with the Fifth Wall team. And let's get to work.
Let's get to work. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Dan.